Questions have always been the beginning of wisdom. They are not weapons meant to destroy belief. They are tools meant to sharpen understanding. The purpose of the following questions is not to strip anyone of their faith, community, or meaning. Their purpose is reflection. They ask us to pause and examine whether the beliefs that we carry were freely chosen or quietly inherited, whether they nurture our humanity or ask us to silence parts of ourselves in order to belong. Any system that claims to guide the human soul should be able to withstand honest inquiry. If a belief is true, reflection will only strengthen it. If a tradition is just, transparency will only deepen trust. But if questions themselves are treated as dangerous, then the real concern may not be doubt, it may be control. Ultimately, the goal is insight. To understand how power, tradition, identity, and faith interact in our lives. To recognize where beliefs uplift us and where it may limit us. And most importantly, to remind ourselves that the human mind was not created merely to obey. It was created to think, to question, and to grow. Reflection is not the enemy of faith or meaning. It is the path toward a more conscious and honest life. Now I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And as we review the text that we're reading, I want you to think about these questions and answer them within yourself. Who benefits from your belief? Not your private spirituality, but the beliefs you were taught to obey. Who profits from a worldview that begins with the idea that you were born guilty? Who gains authority when you are told that your very nature is corrupt? Who stands between you and your own conscience and calls themselves necessary? If you are told that you are powerless without them, whose power grows? If your goodness must be approved by an institution, who controls the definition of good? If you are trained to confess your weakness every week, who is trained to receive your submission? If you are taught that questioning is rebellion, who is protected from scrutiny? If obedience is a virtue, who receives the obedience? If suffering is called holiness, who benefits from your endurance? If injustice is framed as God's will, who is relieved of responsibility? If you are taught to wait for justice in the next world, who is free to rule this one? If you are taught to turn the other cheek, who keeps striking you? If humility is demanded only from the powerless, who keeps their pride? If the poor are promised treasure in heaven, who keeps the treasure on earth? If doubt is treated as sin, who avoids difficult questions. If knowledge must pass through approved interpreters, who controls knowledge? If your instincts are called dangerous, whose authority replaces them? If your body is called sinful, who gains control over it? If your desires are labeled as shameful, who decides what is pure? If love must be approved by doctrine, who becomes the gatekeeper of love? If fear of punishment governs your morality, is that morality or is that control? If forgiveness is preached to the oppressed but not accountability to the powerful, what kind of justice is that? If a system teaches you how to obey but never how to govern yourself, what was the lesson really for? If the rules teach submission but never liberation, whose freedom were they protecting? If the playbook trains you to accept authority but never to wield responsibility, who wrote the playbook? Who benefits from you following the rules? If you were given instructions for kneeling but not for standing, what position were you expected to remain in? If generations are taught to distrust their own moral instincts, who becomes the permanent referee of right and wrong? If a system demands your loyalty but discourages your self-respect, what kind of relationship is that? If your worth begins with guilt, who owns your redemption? And finally, if the story you inherited teaches you that you are broken, powerless, and dependent, who benefits from you believing that story? And who might you become if you stopped believing it?